Hi everybody, Grandad here again. Well, I'm back with this little adjustable electronic voltage kit. The LM, what was it called again? The LM317, which I tried to build just a little while ago on the last video. And I've had no luck with it, it hasn't worked. Now, I don't know what I did wrong. I tried to follow as many instructions, and I looked at a chap on the internet, as I mentioned, who'd built it before. Now, he was quite an expert, and he said he built hundreds of these kits, so he was quite an expert. But although he was an expert, he wasn't really appreciating the fact that people are amateurs like me, who need to be told every little morsel of what information you can give. Because because he knows, he takes things for granted that you know what things mean. And, way things go up and which way round they go. And he didn't really explain it terribly well. And it's a very difficult little kit. I mean, it's only tiny, as you can see. And his had slightly different wires on his. I mean, these three wires, which are very tricky. The one's red, the one's yellow, and one's black. Now, on his, it was red, white, and black. So that was different anyway. Now, I thought that I'd put the LED in wrong. I think I explained that because you have to put the LED around the positive and negative. But on this board, for some stupid reason, they'd put a symbol on the board. Now, if I can just magnify down in here and have a little look, I can perhaps draw this symbol that they'd put on it. No, unfortunately, I can't see the symbol. Now, the symbol, if I recall, it was like that. It was like that, showing a diode or LED. I think that's the symbol for LED. Now, on the board here, it was sort of what the pointy bit, as I say, was going down. So I assumed that that was coming from the positive side. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. And if you know any different, you correct me. But that didn't help me, and it didn't say positive or negative on it. So I put it in the one way, and I tried to dis-solder it. Now, incidentally, when you're soldering, I mean, as a beginner like me, you put things together, and when you're really good at it and you know you're putting them in the right place, you can put really flat down on the board, really tight on. And then when you've soldered it, you cut off the legs. But that means if you have to unsolder it, or take it off for some reason, it's very difficult, because the legs are so short, that you can't get your soldering sucker to work very often. And it's very difficult to hold on to the component because they're so tiny and pull it out. And because you've got two wires, one separated, you can only undo one at a time with the soldering iron. So you'll release one, then you release the other. It's very difficult. Now, if you left the legs a little bit longer, if it's possible to do that, and if you're not sure whether you've put it in the right place, leave the legs as long as you possibly can, so that if you have put it in the wrong place and you want to change it, you can either unsolder it by holding on to the longer legs and do something, or you can actually cut them off on the other side of the board, so you release the component and then pull out the little bits of soldering sticks singly, so you can clear the hole out. And I found that if you get a pin and there's a solder left in the hole after you've unsoldered, you stick a pin in there and wriggle it around, you can make the hole big enough to get the wire back through again, and then you can resolder it. Now, I had to mark that LED with the way round I'd put it, with a little bit of Indian ink. I hadn't got a Sharpie, that would have been better, but I hadn't got a Sharpie. So I put a bit of Indian ink on the one side, and I swapped it round and put it back in and tried it again. Nothing happened. And so I figured that the problem was with these wires. Now, these wires, incidentally, on the board, it's got three little symbols which mean absolutely nothing to me, and because there's no schematic to tell me where these wires go, there was any place they could go. Now, the top wire is marked with a UCC, which means nothing to me, and the middle one has got SEN, which could mean sender or sense or send or something. And the bottom one is GND, which I assumed, like he did, I think, that it was ground. That could be the symbol for ground. So I put what I consider to be the ground wire, which is usually the black wire. Now, I don't know whether it is on this stupid thing from China. Maybe they put it the other way around. They didn't give me any instructions, didn't tell me any. And I think that's very naughty of them. I mean, these things are very cheap, but it wouldn't hurt to put a bit of paper in to tell you what things are all about. And they know you can't read Chinese in England, so you need something in English that's going to explain it and give you some idea. I think I know these things are cheap, but I'd rather pay an extra £1 and get some instructions to tell you exactly where things go. And on the board, usually they're marked pretty well. I mean, you can use it by process elimination and by size, and sometimes you know something about it, and as you learn, you find out things. So somebody who knew something about it, would probably find it easy enough. But there's not a terrible lot of information. Now, my wife's always telling me off for buying these things, and she tells me off even more when they don't work or they blow up. And, even though it's cheap, you've wasted your money if it doesn't work. Now, his actually worked. So I went back and I watched his video 4 times. And even then, I couldn't really tell where he'd put these blooming wires in. I think I'd got them round the wrong way. So I changed them round so that the red wire, which I'm sure he said was live, he'd put it in the UCC, I'm sure. And he'd put the white wire in the middle where I originally got the red wire. And that was the SEN. So I changed it all around, took it out because nothing seemed to happen. The heatsink got a little bit warm, but it didn't seem to do any damage to anything. So I changed these wires round and I plugged it back in again. Now, I don't know what went wrong. I don't know whether I was totally wrong or what happened, but it didn't work. Nothing came on my little dial here. The little dial didn't have anything on it. The LED didn't light up. But what did happen was this little pot, this silly little twiddly pot thing here, started to smoke. And in fact, it sort of got red hot inside somehow. So I rather fancy I've cooked the goose on that. I think I've ruined that pot somehow. So electricity was obviously going through there. Now I plugged in, as you know, a 12-volt thing. Now I noticed on his video, when he did it, he used a smaller current because he got a box where he could regulate the current down. And he used about 5 or 6 volts, I think, to test it. And, that's how he did it. And then he didn't get any smoke or anything, and everything lit up. So he knew he'd sort of got it right. And so he tested the voltage and everything seemed to be working. And then later on, he put a 12 volt through, which worked perfectly all right. So I thought I was safe enough putting 12 volts through because that was all I'd got available at that moment. And I didn't think it would cook its goose. But anyway, it did. Now, as I say, I'm trying to clue everybody in about this. Now, if you buy one of these, I hope maybe you'll pay a little bit more, perhaps from a different supplier, and get one with some instructions. But if you don't, be very careful. Make sure you mount all your especially that LED. Now, taking that LED back out again was really tricky. Now, had I have left the legs long on it, because for testing it didn't. I mean, it needs to be mounted quite low if you're going to put this thing on, because this sits over the top of it. So you need to push the LED right in. But you can do that later. I mean, you can wire it like I have, so the wires are coming out, and chop them off if you want them longer. I mean, I was going to mount this slightly different. I wasn't going to mount it inside there. I was going to mount it into, because it didn't come with a box. Now, I've seen these, and they come with a little box, a little Perspex box that you can keep them in. And maybe they're a little bit dearer with like that, but maybe I'll send for another one. I don't know if I can sneak it to my wife not noticing, because I really want this little regulator, because I'm going to do some experiments with low current electrolysis and stuff. And I want a low current adjuster. Now, I know you can buy plugs and things with adjusters on, but I find they don't work terribly well. So I thought this was really good because it's got a clock on it, so you could see exactly what voltage you were putting through. And if the voltage dropped, you could put it up a bit or down a bit or whatever. And when I want to make some oxides to do some thermite in and bits and pieces like that, you need low current on bits of metal and copper and stuff to make copper oxide and iron oxides and all that sort of thing. So I really want one of these, and I've been waiting a long time because this took a month to come from China, and it's a bit of a blow because it doesn't work. And I think now, because I wired it perhaps wrongly, I don't know if anyone knows where I wired it wrongly and then can tell me, and if it can be corrected. I doubt, because once these things don't work, I mean, they're virtually scrap then. I mean, maybe some of the components are still good and I can use them if I buy a kit and there's a component missing and it just happens to be something on one of these, so it's worth hanging on to steal the parts back off. But of course, it's very difficult. Once you've soldered them, the legs on them are very tiny. And so what I always suggest, again, I'll mention it, try to mount these things as long as you possibly can. Obviously, to make it tidy as you can and to fit it together. But leave the legs as long as you can, because if they're long legs, you can cut them off and use the thing again if on another build. So some of the parts are useful, but I think I may have cooked the goose on this pot, as he called it, or regulating knob, dial, whatever you call this thing. I don't know. He called it a pot. Maybe that's a slang name for it, but he called it a pot. I call it a variable capacitor type thing. I don't know quite what it is, but that was what you turn to alter the current. Now, as I say, I'm very disappointed with this because I really wanted it and I've been waiting a long time for it. Fortunately, the summer's not with us yet, so I can't do much outside with electronics and things. But I really want this to work, and I'm really annoyed that it hasn't worked. I know it's only £3 and it doesn't really matter, you know, but when you wait all that time and you put all that effort in, you expect it to work. Now, I don't know whether this may have a faulty component, because I bought things from China before and I paid a lot of money for a Tesla coil, a musical Tesla coil, and that only worked for about 30 seconds and packed in. Now, I'd wired it correctly because it actually worked and lit up and did everything, but then it just packed in. So obviously the components with these things are so cheap and nasty, if you like. They make them in the thousands and they send them out in kits, so you can't really complain about them. And, you know, there's no way of getting in touch with them anyway. But you can't really complain, and people say, oh, it's only £3. I won't bother to complain about that. And of course, the Chinaman gets £3 for nothing. He's selling his dodgy components. Now, maybe if I send for another one, like I did with the Tesla coil, because I mean, the first one cost me £22. It got an extra gadget in it, but it wasn't very clever. And it didn't work. It just packed in after about 10 minutes and wouldn't work anymore. And I sent for another one, it was only £5, and that worked. Seemed to work perfectly. I'm going to fiddle around with it. One of the components wasn't quite right, so I'm going to take the component off the other one. I'm going to rob it, like I've said, and fit the other thing back on, and perhaps put a fan on it to cool the heat sinks down. And so that works. That works okay. I'm satisfied with that. That does more or less what it can do. And if I'd got a variable voltage for that, then I could put a bit more power through it. And I might even get the musical part, because I didn't show the musical part. Now, I'm sorry I didn't show the musical part, but because it was only a low current I was only using about a 9-volt battery or something, and there wasn't much current there. So the music, I mean, you wouldn't have heard it anyway, but I couldn't get the musical bit to work on the actual Tesla coil. But I'm sure it does work, coming out of the plasma, which is rather interesting. But I need to have a little bit higher voltage on that to do that. Anyway, so I'm sure I've wired this thing up correctly. So it may well be that there's a faulty part in here, or one of the other parts I put in was wrong, and you spotted me putting it in the wrong place. One of these capacitors or something, because not capacitors. What do they call it? Resistors. Now I got a bit mixed up with the resistors because they only got colours. Now I looked on I got a calculator thing here that. They said you can get a calculator off the internet, but I tried to do that and I couldn't get it, so I don't know how that works. They say if you put in the colours into a calculator thing, and they'll tell you what the farad, whatever they are, farads or whatever they are, tell you which one's which. But they were different. One was 10k, I think, and the other was 24k, I think. Now again, I don't think it would hurt for the manufacturer. I mean, I've had these things before, and with the Tesla coil when it came, the one was marked with a little bit of sticky tape on the end, and it said 10k on it. Now, that doesn't take much trouble to just write a little bit of sticky and put a 10k. At least you'd know which one was which, and therefore you could follow the board along. I mean, most things are self-explanatory, but I think things could be a little bit better. I think they really ought to get their act together and put things in a little bit better way. I'm sure more people would have more confidence in building these things and going for them, because I mean, if like me, if you got one of these things and you waited all that time, put it all together, and then it doesn't work, you'd say, "Oh, I'm not going to buy from them again. That's a load of rubbish." So they're not going to sell them eventually. People will catch on to it and say, "Oh, they only sell crap. It doesn't work." So I think it would be in their best interests if anybody from China's out there listening to this, which I doubt it, but if they listen to this, or you know how to complain to them, these Chinese people, to get their act together and put some instructions in. Tell us what to do. We buy stuff off you, but we want it to work. And if it doesn't work, then it's just rubbish. Anyway, that's enough me moaning and groaning, I suppose. Another 15-minute video, but I said I'd put it up and I'd tell you what had happened. So this is going to go back in his bag, which I don't know where it is. Here's the bag. It's going to go back in his bag as a fail. And I'll just keep it as a bit of electronic scrap, which I may get round to doing something with at some stage. That's not a very good bag, that isn't. Might have a better bag for it sometime, but anyway, I'll put it back in this bag for now and stick it in the drawer with all the other things that aren't working. That's not a very good bag. Anyway, I'll chuck that bag away. I'll find another bag to put that in, stick it in my cupboard, and until I see you again with another little build, I'm hoping that this has been useful. Now, people might say, oh, well, things don't work, we don't really interested. But if you're a beginner like me, you've got to learn somehow. And you need to learn from people who are learning. And maybe somebody who learns can explain it a little bit better. I hope I've included every little possible bit that I can think of that might help somebody to be successful with this. Now, I'm sure they do work. Maybe there's a faulty part in mine, I don't know. But I'm sure they do work, because his worked, and worked very well. And I obviously did something wrong and failed. But maybe they do work and you can figure it out. I mean, some of the things are wrong. Some of the holes weren't quite in the right place. And these little pegs on this funny little dial went straight through, and I had to put washers on them. But fortunately, I'd got some. And so things like that were really a little bit niggly things. But, I think they ought to get their act together and put things a little bit better together so that you don't have these problems. And then you're more likely to buy something else from them. So anyway, this is Grandad saying... sorry about it, didn't work, but we'll try again next time. And until I meet you again, and some other crazy thing I'm up to, I'll say, but I think the camera's a little bit better today. I think the lighting was a bit off on that last video. I'm sorry about that, but for some reason the light was coming through and it wasn't very good, but it seems a bit brighter today. I don't know why. It's very strange, these technical things. They don't always work for you. But I try to put a good enough picture up, and I try to tell you everything I can. I'm either on, I know, but hopefully that's been of use. And until we meet again, it's Grandad, as usual, signing off and saying bye-bye now. Bye-bye. Good luck. Don't forget to like and subscribe.